You ready, presenters? Here we go. First one up is Dr. Philip Kiernan, and his presentation is, come on up, Philip, is The Hoard of the Rings, a recent discovery in the Forbidden Forest, and he is representing the College of the Arts.
Okay, are we ready? Let's go. So I'm going to take us from this fabulous brewery to the land of beer. We're going to Germany, to a small town called Wareswald, which is just about 2 hours west of Frankfurt, on the border almost with France. And in Wareswald, I've been conducting an excavation for the past 2 years with students from KSU. Wareswald is a small forest situated at the foot of the Schaumburg mountain in the Saarland. Its unusual Old German name can be translated into English as the Forbidden Forest, not because it contains dragons and unicorns, but because hunting and logging rights would have been restricted to local nobles in the medieval period. Since the 18th century, Roman ruins have been known there, and we do not know the name of the town's name in the Roman period, but we do know it was inhabited from the 1st through to the 4th century AD. If we could travel back in time to about the 2nd century AD, we would find a small town in the Forbidden Forest, situated on an important Roman highway. In addition to houses and shops, the site included a temple dedicated to the god Mars. In the summers of 2018 and 2019, I brought 2 small groups of students to excavate around the Mars temple. Our work is a collaboration with the German nonprofit company Terex and the State Archaeological Service of the Saarland, who have been digging there since 2001. Further excavations were planned, of course, for 2020 and 2021 with larger groups of 10 students and support from the Halle Foundation, but were thwarted by the COVID pandemic. We'll start again in 2022, and the past years have been spent working on the study and publication of old finds of artifacts made at the site. These include a discovery made in 2018 in an alley just outside one of the town's houses, a group of finger rings threaded onto a piece of bronze wire. As the objects were clearly delicate, the find was removed as a single block of earth and brought to the State Conservation Laboratory. In the lab, the block could be x-rayed and the rings carefully removed and conserved. It was found to contain 24 bronze rings. Once restored, photographed, and documented, discoveries like this are studied by intensive library work in which parallels from other contexts are sought. The wire, for example, on which the rings had been threaded, was not a piece of scrap metal, but a well-known type of Roman bracelet on which the rings were being stored. These bracelets are commonly found in female burials of the early 4th century AD. Roman rings often contained engraved stones that were used to create wax seals and to sign documents. The gems in the 7 rings in the hoard were not precious stones, but they were glass imitations of a kind of blue gem called a niccolo. The surfaces of these glass gems have not survived well. Only 3 are legible and depict a lion, the zodiac sign Leo, the mythological inventor Daedalus, and the hero Hercules wrestling a lion. Glass gems like these were generally made in the 3rd century until about AD 280. 6 more of the rings had plain circular glass gems. Such plain stones and colorful enamels replaced engraved seal stones when the tradition of signing documents with wax seals fell out of fashion in the late 3rd century. The 2 octagonal rings are also a form that was common in the early 4th century. 4 of the rings had empty sockets where the gem should have been mounted but never was. The shape and perforations in these rings are a direct copy of common gold and silver rings from the mid-3rd century AD with similar openwork shoulders. The last 6 rings in the hoard are also incomplete. The remains of a casting funnel, the sprue, is still attached. Once it had been filed off, these rings would have been stamped with an inscription, and rings with inscriptions were popular in the 4th century AD and usually contained greetings, names, and sweet love messages. Rings were an important sign of status across the Roman world and could say a lot about their owner's identity. Men and women often wore multiple rings on both hands, as we see in this painted linen shroud from Roman Egypt. But the presence of unfinished rings in our hoard shows that this was not one woman's personal jewelry collection, but the stock of a craftsman or jewelry dealer. The rings were being made in the town and sold to locals and travelers as cheap trinkets, souvenirs, and gifts. Our hoard is quite unlike other hoards of gold and silver, rings and jewelry. Hoards that had been carefully hidden in the ground by their owners because of their enormous value and metal value. The Forbidden Forest hoard was a casual loss of very low value rings, and this makes it an extremely rare find, a chance to look at the rings of people in daily life. The rings were made of simple bronze, but the metal has a similar appearance to gold itself when it's new. Their shapes and the glass gems imitated expensive gold and silver rings of a kind that most of the inhabitants of this small rural town could not afford. The social prestige value of jewelry was enormous, so much so that this relief from a family grave monument at Arlon depicts a woman pulling her ring out of her jewelry basket and showing it to her husband. It announces to the world that nothing but the best and the height of Roman fashion was good enough for this particular wealthy provincial family. None of our 24 rings can make the wearer turn invisible, grant them wisdom, or dominion over dwarves, elves, or men. But for not very much money, they gave the wearer a feeling that they were being part of high Roman society. And this was a kind of magic in and of itself. Thank you.
Wow, that's a high bar. Thank you very much, Phil. That was awesome.